What bad thing did your kid do that you were secretly proud of? I was at Home Depot buying lumber for my 10-year-old Lyle's treehouse when my phone exploded with texts. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, each more hysterical than the last. I'm calling the police on Lyle. He just stole from my purse my entire month of wages. I abandoned my Saturday project and immediately drove to Miranda's house. What puzzled me was that Lyle had never stolen in his life. This was the kid who returned $1 to the cafeteria lady when she gave him too much change. Miranda was on the front porch when I pulled up, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, officer. My son stole $600 from my purse. Please send someone immediately. She glared at me while giving the address, her face purple with rage. Inside, I found Lyle sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded calmly in his lap. No fidgeting, just this eerie calm I'd never seen before. What happened? I asked Lyle. Why did you take money from your mother's purse? He looked me straight in the eyes. I didn't take her money, Dad. I gave it back. Miranda stormed in. Gave it back? What do you mean gave it back? It's not there. As she was yelling, a police officer arrived. Officer Hunter looked tired but professional. Ma'am, you reported a theft? Yes. Miranda pointed at Lyle. My son stole $600 from my purse. I want him arrested. Maybe that'll teach him. Officer Hunter pulled out his notepad. How old is your son? 10, I interjected. Sir, please let me handle this. Hunter turned to Lyle. Son, did you take money from your mother's purse? Yes, I did, Lyle said clearly. Miranda smirked. See, he admits it. Why did you take it? Hunter asked. Sam, Lyle called out. Can you come downstairs, please? Sam, Miranda's stepson, a 8-year-old boy, crept into the kitchen, tears already streaming down his face. Tell the officer about Bailey, Lyle said gently. Sam's voice shook. Bailey's my friend Michael's dog. Bailey got hit by a car and needs surgery or she's gonna die. It costs $1,000. Hunter kept writing. Okay, and? I made a lemonade stand, Sam continued, sobbing harder. All summer, every day. I made $400 to help save Bailey. The officer looked up. That's a lot of lemonade. People gave extra when they saw my sign. Help save Bailey. Mr. Jacobson gave me 20 for 1 cup. Where's this money now? Hunter asked. Mom took it, Sam whispered. She said kids don't know what to do with money like that. Miranda's face went white. That's a lie, she shot, before the officer even questioned her about it. I didn't take it. They're just getting confused with something else. Officer Hunter suspiciously turned. Ma'am, you're sure you didn't take the money your stepson raised? She pretended to think. Positive, officer, I didn't. She put her hand to her nose. Her voice was shaky and filled with fear. You do know willingly lying to an officer is a criminal offense, ma'am, Hunter said. If you are lying, that warrants jail time. Miranda was ghost white now, tapping her feet, sweat visibly starting to trickle. I know, officer. I'm not lying. I'm not the thief here. Lyle is. He stole the 600 and I gave it back to Sam. Lyle interrupted her. Even the officer shook a little at the power in his voice. $417 from the lemonade stand, plus $183 from Sam's birthday cards she's been saving. That's exactly $600. The 100 that was in her wallet. I took what she stole and gave it back to who it belongs to. Everyone looked at Miranda. Her knees were literally starting to buckle. Lyle then pulled out his phone, showing the officer video of Sam counting bills at his stand. $380, getting close to Bailey's surgery. Miranda's voice responded. Give it here. I'll keep this safe. Officer Hunter watched the video twice. Ma'am, you stated you didn't take his money, but here you're very clearly doing so. Explain. Tears started to roll down her cheeks, and she gripped the counter. Kids don't know what to do with money. We have bills. That's not what I asked. Hunter interrupted. Did you take the money he raised? Miranda was silent, ghost white, dry heaving, doubling over. That's when Sam pulled a crumpled notebook from behind his back. I wrote down everything, officer. Every person who gave money. Look, Hunter flipped through pages of Sam documenting every sale and donation, with crayon drawings of Bailey getting better. Ma'am, Officer Hunter said, what I'm seeing here is theft, possible fraud, on top of lying to an officer, and regarding a minor. Miranda was chugging water to keep her from passing out. Hunter closed his notepad. In conclusion, your 10-year-old son took the money you illegally stole from an 8-year-old. I'm sorry, officer. Please don't arrest me, was the only thing she could say. If that money doesn't make it to that dog's surgery, I will. Understood? Hunter said. She nodded repeatedly like a bobblehead who'd just been uppercutted. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Miranda's husband. Just got home. Sam told me Lyle found something besides the money. I asked Lyle what he meant. Dad, remember how Grandma Rose can't manage her own finances anymore? My blood went cold. What Lyle said next made me turn the car around immediately. She's been taking money from Grandma Rose's account, Lyle said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. I slammed the brakes and pulled over, my hands shaking as I looked at what he was holding. It was a bank statement with Grandma Rose's name on it, showing withdrawal after withdrawal, each one for $200 or $300. The dates went back 3 months, and I felt my stomach drop as I realized what this meant. I turned the car around and drove back to Miranda's house, my mind racing with what we'd just discovered. When we pulled into the driveway again, Miranda's husband's truck was there, and he met us at the door looking exhausted and defeated. He saw the papers in my hand, and his shoulders sagged even more. You found out about Rose's money, he said quietly, not even making it a question. I nodded, and he stepped aside to let us in, running his hand through his hair. I suspected something was wrong when bills started piling up, even though Miranda said she was helping manage Rose's finances, he admitted. We sat at the kitchen table while Sam played upstairs, and I spread out all the receipts Lyle had found hidden in Miranda's closet. There were dozens of them, each one a withdrawal from Grandma Rose's account, and as we added them up, the total came to over $4,000. My hands were shaking as I organized them by date, seeing the pattern of how Miranda had been draining the account slowly enough that she thought no one would notice. Miranda's husband put his head in his hands, and I could see him processing what this meant for his family. I gathered up all the evidence and told them I needed to make some calls, walking out to my car with Lyle beside me. Once we were in the car, I called Adult Protective Services, my voice steady as I explained the situation information to the caseworker. She took down all the information, asking detailed questions about the dates, amounts, and what evidence we had. "We'll open an investigation immediately given what you're telling me," she said, and I could hear her typing rapidly. I gave her Miranda's address and Grandma Rose's information, then hung up feeling like I'd just set something huge in motion. That night I barely slept, lying in bed making mental lists of everything that needed to happen. I had to secure Grandma's accounts, document everything properly, and figure out what this meant for custody arrangements with Lyle. My mind kept racing through all the implications, thinking about how to protect both kids from the mess their mother had created. At 3 in the morning, I finally gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen, writing everything down on paper so I wouldn't forget anything important. The next morning, I took Lyle to the school early and pulled his counselor aside in the hallway. "There's a family crisis happening," I said quietly, not wanting to give too many details. "Can you keep an eye on him today?" She nodded with concern, and I headed straight to the bank after dropping him off. Nina Guerra from the fraud department met me in a small office, reviewing Grandma Rose's accounts on her computer screen. "I can see the unusual withdrawal patterns you're describing," she said, pointing at the screen, "but I need proper authorization to freeze the accounts since you're not listed on them." She gave me the forms I'd need to file and explained the process for getting emergency control of the accounts. I was filling out paperwork when my phone buzzed with a text from Miranda's husband. "Found more evidence in our bedroom," it said, followed by photos of casino receipts and scratch-off lottery tickets. The amounts on the casino receipts matched the withdrawals from Grandma Rose's account almost exactly, and suddenly, everything made horrible sense. The gambling problem explained where all the stolen money had gone and why recovery would be nearly impossible. I left the bank feeling sick and drove straight to Grandma Rose's care facility to check on her. The staff at the front desk recognized me and mentioned they hadn't seen Miranda in weeks, even though she'd been telling everyone she visited regularly to help with finances. I found Grandma Rose in the common room, doing a puzzle, and sat with her for a while, not knowing how to explain what was happening. She smiled at me and patted my hand, asking about Lyle, and I realized she had no idea what her granddaughter had been doing. On my way out, I stopped to talk with the facility director about adding security measures to protect Rose's remaining assets. That afternoon, my phone rang, and it was Officer Hunter calling to follow up on the situation with Sam. "How did the dog surgery money situation work out?" he asked, and I told him Sam had gotten the money to his friend. "Good to hear, but I'm actually calling because there's something else," I said, then explained about the elder abuse discovery. "There's something really strange about how calm Lyle is through all this mess. A 10-year-old sitting with his hands folded while his mom screams about calling the police on him." He listened carefully and gave me the contact information for Detective Morrison, who handled financial crimes against the elderly. "This is serious stuff," Hunter said before hanging up. "Make sure you document everything and keep those receipts safe." I hung up and started organizing all the bank statements and receipts into folders when my phone rang again 2 days later with a number I didn't recognize. The woman introduced herself as Melissa Hart from Adult Protective Services and said she needed to schedule an interview with my mother at the care facility as soon as possible based on the report Detective Morrison had filed. We set it up for the next morning, and I spent that night pulling together every document I could find: bank statements showing the withdrawals, the receipts from Miranda's purchases, even old birthday cards where Grandma had written about wanting to save money for her grandkids' college funds. The interview happened in a small conference room at the facility, and I watched Grandma get confused when Melissa asked about her finances, saying she thought Miranda was just helping her pay bills. I handed over the thick folder of evidence and felt sick to my stomach, like I was stabbing my sister in the back, even though she was the one who had stolen from our mother. Melissa took notes for over an hour and said she would be opening a full investigation. That afternoon, while I was still processing everything, the vet's office called, and the receptionist said Bailey's surgery had to happen within 3 days, or they couldn't guarantee the dog would survive, but they needed the $1,000 deposit immediately to schedule it. I explained that the money Sam had raised was now part of a criminal investigation and asked if they could wait, but she said their policy was strict. No deposit meant no surgery slot. I called Detective Morrison to ask if Sam's money could be released, but he said it was evidence and could take weeks to process through the system. The next morning, I met with an elder law attorney downtown who explained that getting conservatorship over Grandma's finances would cost about $3,000 in legal fees and take several months, but it was the only way to protect her from future exploitation. He showed me a stack of paperwork thicker than a phone book and said we'd need medical evaluations, court hearings, and testimony from multiple witnesses about Grandma's mental state. I signed the retainer agreement, knowing I'd have to dip into my kids' college savings to pay for it. When I picked Lyle up from the school that day, he didn't say a word the whole ride home, just stared out the window with this blank look I'd never seen on him before. We went straight to the backyard and started working on the treehouse, hammering boards in place without talking, both of us needing to hit something that wouldn't hit back. After about an hour of silence, he finally said his mom had been texting him all day from different numbers since he'd blocked her main one. My phone started blowing up that evening with calls from Miranda, and when I didn't answer, she left voicemail after voicemail, her voice getting more unhinged with each message, screaming that I was poisoning everyone against her, that I was stealing her kids, that she would make me pay for ruining her life. The attorney had told me to save everything and not respond, so I downloaded a call recording app and let them pile up as evidence. The bank called the next day with their investigation results, and the fraud department guy explained that Miranda had been using Grandma's debit card PIN, which she must have watched Grandma enter or gotten her to write down somehow. They could freeze the account immediately, but getting the stolen money back would require a court order, and even then, it might be impossible if Miranda had already spent it all. I was writing down the case number when I got got a text from a number I didn't recognize with a photo of a donation jar at a local grocery store that said, "Help Save Bailey," with a picture of the dog and Sam's story written on it. Michael's mom had started a fundraising campaign and already collected $200, but we still needed $800 more for the surgery deposit. The next week, Melissa Hart called to say she needed to interview Miranda's husband as part of the investigation and asked if I had his work number. I gave it to her, and later that day, he texted me saying he had given them everything: bank statements showing they were behind on rent, credit card bills Miranda had hidden from him, receipts for shopping sprees she claimed were for groceries. He said he was considering divorce and asked if I could help him understand his options for custody of Sam. I made an appointment with my attorney for him too. That Friday morning, I walked into my credit union and took out a personal loan for $1,000, knowing the interest would hurt, but also knowing Sam had already lost enough because adults in his life kept failing him. I drove straight to the vet and paid Bailey's deposit in cash, and they scheduled the surgery for the following Tuesday. The relief in Sam's voice when I called to tell him made the debt worth it. Monday afternoon, I was at work when the school called saying Lyle had gotten into a physical fight with another student who had been making comments about his mother being a thief and asking if his family was going to jail. I left my office immediately and found him in the principal's office with a split lip and torn shirt, his knuckles red and swollen. The principal said Lyle threw the first punch and would be suspended for 3 days, but I could tell she felt bad about the situation. On the drive home, I tried to find the right words and finally just said that loving someone doesn't mean accepting when they hurt others, that you can love your mom and still know what she did was wrong. He nodded and looked out the window again, and I realized this was changing him in ways that would last forever. 2 days into his suspension, I was helping Lyle with his math homework when I heard pounding on the front door. Through the peephole, I saw Miranda's face twisted with rage as she hammered her fist against the wood. She screamed that I was keeping her son from her, and she had every right to see him. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while keeping the deadbolt locked. The operator could hear her yelling through the phone about parental alienation and how she'd break down the door if she had to. Lyle came downstairs and his face went white when he heard his mom's voice. I pointed him back upstairs and mouthed for him to stay in his room. Miranda started kicking the door, and I could see the frame shake with each hit. Within 10 minutes, Officer Hunter pulled up, and I watched through the window as he approached Miranda. She immediately started gesturing wildly at my house, and I could hear her telling him I was kidnapping her son. Hunter spoke calmly but firmly, and after several minutes of back and forth, he walked her to her car. She drove off, but not before screaming that this wasn't over. Hunter knocked, and I let him in to take my statement about the incident. He said he'd warned her about trespassing and would arrest her if she came back. After he left, I found Lyle sitting on his bed with his knees pulled up to his chest. His hands were shaking, and I sat next to him until he stopped trembling. The next morning, a detective called about the elder abuse case and asked me to come to the station. I dropped Lyle at my sister's house and drove downtown where Detective Morrison was waiting with a thick folder. He went through each piece of evidence I'd found at Miranda's house, including the bank statements and forged checks. He explained that with the amounts involved and Grandma Rose being vulnerable, this could mean serious prison time. I spent 3 hours going through dates and transactions while he took notes. He mentioned they'd already contacted the bank and frozen several accounts. That afternoon, I drove to Grandma Rose's care facility where her doctor was running cognitive tests. She couldn't remember what year it was or who the president was. The doctor wrote in his report that she lacked capacity for financial decisions and hadn't for at least 2 years. This matched up with when the suspicious transactions had started according to the bank records. I sat with Grandma for a while, and she kept asking where her checkbook was because she needed to pay bills. The nurse told me Miranda used to visit weekly, but always left with signed checks. I called a family lawyer that evening and explained everything that was happening. She said we needed to file for emergency custody modification immediately given the criminal investigations. The retainer was $3,000, which hurt, but I couldn't risk Lyle going back to Miranda's house. We filed the paperwork the next day, and the court scheduled a hearing for the following week. That same night, I got a text from Miranda's husband saying he couldn't handle the situation anymore. He was taking Sam to stay with his parents for a while and needed space to figure things out. He said the police had been to their house twice more and neighbors were starting to talk. Sam needed stability, and being away from the chaos was best for now. 2 days later, Michael's mom called to say Bailey's surgery had gone perfectly. The vet removed the damaged tissue and repaired the internal bleeding, but recovery would take months. She'd set up a schedule where different kids could visit and help with Bailey's care. Sam would get first shift every Saturday morning, which gave him something to look forward to. The custody hearing came faster than expected, and I sat in the courtroom watching Miranda sob to the judge. She claimed I was poisoning Lyle against her and that the charges were all misunderstandings. The judge reviewed the police reports and pending criminal cases, then ordered supervised visitation only. Melissa Hart asking about Miranda's husband makes me wonder if she already suspects this goes deeper than just one person acting alone. These investigators usually know more than they let on right away. Miranda would get 2 hours every Sunday at a court-approved facility with a social worker present. She collapsed in her chair crying, but I just watched Lyle's shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. A letter from Adult Protective Services arrived the next day stating they'd substantiated the elder abuse allegations. The case was referred for criminal prosecution, and Miranda would be required to attend financial responsibility classes. They also mandated gambling addiction counseling after finding evidence of casino withdrawals from Grandma's accounts. The prosecution would move forward regardless of whether Grandma could testify given the paper trail. I started the conservatorship paperwork that weekend, which meant becoming legally responsible responsible for all of Grandma Rose's finances. The forms asked for detailed financial histories and medical documentation proving incapacity. Each page I filled out showed another way Miranda had taken advantage of someone who'd loved her. Bank statements showed birthday checks meant for grandchildren that never arrived. Withdrawals labeled as groceries that happened at casino ATMs. Forged signatures on documents Grandma couldn't even read anymore. The lawyer said the process would take months, but emergency provisions meant I could protect the remaining assets immediately. Grandma had less than $8,000 left from what should have been over $60,000 in savings. The next week, I found a therapist who worked with kids and made the first appointment for Lyle. He sat in the waiting room picking at a loose thread on his jeans while I filled out forms asking about family history and recent trauma. The therapist came out and shook Lyle's hand like he was an adult, and they went back while I sat there reading old magazines. After 50 minutes, they came back out, and the therapist asked to speak with me alone while Lyle played games on my phone. She said Lyle was showing remarkable strength but needed weekly sessions to process what happened with his mom. I scheduled him for every Tuesday at 4. That same afternoon, Miranda's husband called and said he'd filed separation papers and wanted full custody of Sam. He asked if we could meet at a coffee shop to talk about lawyers, since we were basically fighting the same battle now. We sat at a corner table while he showed me the custody paperwork his lawyer had drawn up. He'd already documented Miranda taking Sam's lemonade money and had statements from neighbors who saw Sam crying at his stand. We exchanged lawyer contacts and agreed to share any evidence we found. 3 days later, the bank called about Grandma Rose's account. After their investigation, they could only recover $2,000 from the fraudulent withdrawals, but said it would be deposited within the week. It wasn't even close to what Miranda stole, but at least it would cover Grandma's medication for the next few months. While going through more of Grandma's mail that had piled up at Miranda's house, I found credit card statements I didn't recognize. 3 different cards, all in Grandma's name with charges at casinos and online gambling sites. The total was only about $4,000, but it showed Miranda had been doing this for months. I called the credit card companies and spent hours on hold explaining that my grandmother had dementia and couldn't have opened these accounts. They said I'd need to file police reports for identity theft. I added it to the growing pile of documentation. That Saturday, we organized a fundraiser at the park for Bailey's ongoing vet bills. Sam made a new sign that said Bailey was getting better but still needed medicine. He sat at the donation table counting every dollar that came in and writing down each person's name in his notebook. People from the neighborhood showed up with baked goods to sell, and kids ran a car wash in the parking lot. By the end of the day, Sam had raised another $300, and his dad said he'd never seen him smile like that in months. The district attorney's office called the following Monday. They were moving forward with elder abuse and identity theft charges against Miranda. The prosecutor said she could face up to 5 years if convicted on all counts. I sat in my car after the call trying to figure out how to explain to Lyle that his mom might go to prison. That night at dinner, I told him about the charges, and he just nodded and kept eating his spaghetti. Later, I heard him crying in his room, but when I knocked, he said he was okay and just needed to be alone. The next week, the court approved my emergency petition for temporary conservatorship over Grandma Rose's finances. The judge said the permanent hearing would be in 3 months, but this would protect her assets immediately. I spent every evening after work going through boxes of statements Miranda had shoved in closets. Bills were months overdue, and Grandma's Medicare paperwork was a mess. I made spreadsheets tracking every withdrawal and charge, highlighting the ones that happened at casinos. Miranda's gambling counselor left me a voicemail saying she was running a family program and thought it would help Lyle understand his mother's addiction. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. Lyle needed to focus on his own healing first before trying to understand why his mom did what she did. Weekends became treehouse time. Lyle and I worked on it together, him holding boards while I hammered them in place. We added walls and a rope ladder and painted it green to blend with the leaves. One Saturday, while we were adding a window, he asked if we could put up a sign that said "No moms allowed." Then his face crumpled, and he started crying for the first time since everything started. I held him while he sobbed into my shirt, his whole body shaking. We didn't put up the sign, but we did add a lock to the door, and he kept the only key. Sam started staying with his dad more often as their new schedule settled in. Every other weekend, he'd come over to play with Lyle, and they'd spend hours in the treehouse making up games. They never talked about what happened with Miranda, but I'd see them sitting together, Sam showing Lyle his donation notebook and Lyle helping him count the money. Their bond stayed strong, even though their family had broken apart. 3 weeks later, I sat in the courthouse watching Miranda sign the plea agreement her lawyer had worked out with the prosecutor. She'd get 2 years probation and had to pay back $100 every month instead of going to jail. Lyle sat next to me, gripping my hand while we watched her write her name on each page. The prosecutor explained she'd also have to do community service and attend some kind of financial responsibility class. I wanted her to get more punishment, but my lawyer reminded me this meant Lyle wouldn't have to testify in court. That same afternoon, I drove straight to the bank and opened new accounts for Grandma Rose with special rules the bank manager helped me set up. Every single check would need 2 signatures now, and monthly statements would go to both me and my lawyer. The bank manager showed me how to track everything online and gave me a special notebook to write down every transaction. I spent hours that night moving Grandma's Social Security and pension deposits to the new accounts and closing all the old ones Miranda had access to. The next morning, I got a call from Lyle's teacher asking me to come in for a meeting about his progress. She showed me his recent test scores and homework assignments, all A's and B's now compared to the C's and D's from earlier in the year. His counselor joined us and said Lyle was talking more in group sessions and even made friends with 2 kids from his math class. They gave me a folder with his improvement charts and a note from the principal congratulating him on making the honor roll. That weekend, Michael's mom called to invite us to a party for Bailey at their house since the dog was finally coming home from the vet. Sam had decorated the whole backyard with streamers and made a giant poster that said, "Welcome home, Bailey," with pictures he'd drawn of her playing fetch. When we got there, Bailey was wearing a cone but wagging her tail and jumping on everyone. Sam couldn't stop smiling and kept feeding her treats while all the neighborhood kids took turns petting her. Michael's dad grilled hot dogs and Sam stood up on a chair to thank everyone who helped save Bailey's life. The first restitution check from Miranda came 2 days later, exactly $100 like the court ordered. I photocopied it before depositing it into Grandma Rose's new account and filed the copy in the folder my lawyer told me to keep. At this rate, it would take her over 4 years to pay back what she stole, but at least it was something. My sister called that week asking about Thanksgiving plans, and I had to explain that half the family wasn't talking to the other half because of everything with Miranda. Some relatives thought I was too harsh pressing charges, while others said I should have done more. Thanksgiving morning, Lyle and I bought turkey sandwiches from the deli and spent the day in the backyard working on the treehouse, adding safety rails and a rope ladder. We didn't talk about missing the big family dinner, but I saw him checking his phone for texts from his cousins that never came. 2 weeks later, the judge approved my petition to become Grandma Rose's permanent conservator after reviewing all the evidence of Miranda's theft. The court clerk handed me a thick packet of papers explaining my responsibilities and legal obligations for managing her money. I had to sign forms promising to file annual reports and keep detailed records of every penny spent on her care. The supervised visitation center called to schedule Miranda's first visit with Lyle for the following Saturday. Lyle didn't want to go, but the court order said he had to see her twice a month at this special building with cameras and social workers watching. Lyle asking about a "No Moms Allowed" sign on the treehouse really makes me wonder what thoughts are going through his head that he's not saying out loud to anyone else right now. I dropped him off at 9 and picked him up at 11, and he was quiet the whole ride home but seemed less angry than before. He told me they played board games and she apologized a lot, but he mostly just nodded and didn't say much back. I met with the bank's refinancing specialist the next week to combine all the loans I'd taken out for lawyers and court costs into one payment. The interest rate was higher than I wanted, but spreading it over 5 years meant I could afford the monthly payment and still keep the house. She printed out the amortization schedule showing I'd pay almost $10,000 in interest by the time it was done, but I signed anyway because keeping things stable for Lyle was worth any price. Sam showed up at our door that Saturday morning with a wagon full of lemonade supplies and a new sign that said "Bailey's Recovery Fund Thank You Sale" with a picture of Bailey without her cone. He set up his stand at the corner like before, but this time people weren't donating for surgery. They were celebrating that Bailey made it through. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down bought 5 cups and told Sam she'd been following the whole story since the police showed up that day. Mr. Jacobson brought his grandkids and they each bought lemonade, while Sam showed them videos on his tablet of Bailey learning to walk again after her surgery. The custody hearing happened 3 weeks after that lemonade stand celebration. Miranda's husband got primary custody of Sam, with the judge ordering supervised visits only for Miranda after everything that came out about the stolen money. We worked out a schedule where Sam could still come over on weekends since the boys had gotten even closer through all this mess. The courtroom was packed with people from the neighborhood who'd bought lemonade from Sam, and they all clapped when the judge made his ruling. Miranda sat there crying, but not the sad kind of tears, more like angry ones, while her lawyer kept telling her to stay quiet. The bailiff had to step closer when she stood up too fast, but she just grabbed her purse and left without looking at anyone. Sam's dad shook my hand afterward and said he'd been documenting stuff for months, but never had enough proof until now. 6 months passed since that first crazy phone call about Lyle stealing, and our whole world looked different now. The boys did homework together every Friday afternoon at my kitchen table while I made snacks and tried not to think about how this wasn't the family setup anyone had planned. Sam's grades went up once he wasn't stressed about his mom taking his stuff anymore, and Lyle seemed calmer, knowing his friend was safe. We'd settled into this new normal where truth mattered more than keeping up appearances, even if it meant our family looked different from before. I took Lyle to visit Grandma Rose at the care facility on a Tuesday when she was having one of her good days. She recognized me right away and grabbed my hand, asking if her money was okay because she'd been having bad dreams about someone taking it. I told her everything was handled and secure now, without mentioning that her own daughter had been the one stealing from her all those months. Lyle showed her pictures on his phone of the treehouse we'd finally finished, and she smiled, saying it looked just like the one she'd had as a kid. The nurse came in to give her medicine and whispered that Rose had been asking about her finances every day that week, like something was bothering her deep down. That treehouse stood tall in our backyard now after all those interrupted Home Depot trips trying to get supplies between court dates and lawyer meetings. Lyle had added this little mailbox to the side where he said kids could leave secret messages if they needed help with something they couldn't tell adults about directly. 3 kids from his class had already used it to tell him about problems at home, and we'd figured out ways to help without making it obvious where the information came from. Sam painted Fort Justice on a wooden sign and hung it by the entrance, even though I suggested maybe something less obvious about what they'd been through. The boys spent every possible hour up there planning things and being regular kids, which felt like the biggest victory after everything they'd witnessed. A thick envelope came from Miranda's lawyer on a Thursday, with her shaky handwriting on a letter apologizing to Lyle for what she'd put him through. We sat at the kitchen table reading it together, letter, and she'd written 5 pages about being sick and making mistakes and hoping he could forgive her someday. Lyle folded it carefully and put it in a box under his bed, saying he'd decide when he was ready to think about forgiveness. But right now, he just needed to be a kid. I didn't push him to respond, because 10-year-olds shouldn't have to figure out how to forgive parents who chose money over doing the right thing. That Saturday, I watched from the kitchen window as Lyle and Sam played pirates in the treehouse with cardboard swords and bandanas tied around their heads. Their laughter echoed across the yard, and for a minute you could forget these were kids who'd learned too early that adults could fail them in the worst ways. Sam pretended to walk the plank while Lyle shouted pirate commands, and neither of them looked worried or scared like they had 6 months ago. They'd built their own safe space up in those branches where they made the rules and protected each other from a world that had shown them its ugly side too soon. The detective called the next week to say the case was officially closed, with Miranda's conviction on the books and restitution payments set up for the next 5 years. She'd gotten probation instead of jail time because of some deal her lawyer worked out, but she had to pay back every penny she'd taken from Rose and from Sam's fundraising. The detective said it wasn't perfect justice, but it was enough to protect the vulnerable people she'd hurt, and sometimes that's all the system can give you. I thanked him and hung up, thinking about how justice looks different from you expect when it finally comes. That night, Lyle asked me if I thought his mom would ever be the same person she used to be before all this happened. I told him honestly that I didn't know, because people change when they do bad things, and sometimes they can't find their way back to who they were before. We sat there on his bed, looking at old photos from when he was little, and Miranda was smiling in every picture like a completely different person. He asked if we were all different now too, and I said yes, but maybe we were stronger in the broken places because we'd learned to protect what really mattered when everything else fell apart. Thanks for sticking with me through all these questions and curious moments. Hopefully my curiosity didn't drive you too crazy. See you next time, and subscribe for more content like this.